So we've looked at how to navigate conflict and set limits to some degree between adult to adult. Now, the thing with adult to adult is they don't have a guidance role with one another. And what we're about to start to look at is where parents or caregivers have a guidance role with their children or those in their care. So the key issues are similarly about finding ways to navigate things without the usual escalations. So we're looking at neutral means of enforcement. So the stop or I'm leaving with labeling. So stop raising your voice or I'm leaving, or can you talk in a friendly tone or I'm leaving. Ways that people can label neutrally in order to be able to get the result without the ineffective and insensitive methodologies. So similarly, there are things that are able to be categorized that are helpful for this, which is why we have the pro forma of the four important aspects of limit setting and enforcement, which is clarity, setting, enforcing, and consistency. Do you want to do you want it closer?
Yeah, that's good.
You have the still? So these four important categories require some level of explanation. For most children, their training, when parents were using various forms of I'm going to call it intimidation aimed at gaining compliance, which could be anything from a look to a softball bat. What we're looking at is what's required in order to do that effectively and sensitively, and my experience is you need four things. The look or the softball bat is the method of enforcement. So what usually happens is that parents do one, enforcement, maybe some setting, often a lot of setting, sometimes no enforcement. What's often the case is there's very little clarity. It's just, don't be so disrespectful, or as opposed to, don't call me names or don't raise your voice to me. And very little consistency. So what's required is all four: clarity, setting, enforcing, and consistency. If you do all four of those, you're going to be getting results. So what you're doing is up-leveling from whatever they're doing to all four. They might be doing all three. They might be doing two. They might be doing one. They might be doing none. But where you're getting to is all four. So that's the design frame that you want to have in your mind in terms of what you're looking for when you're starting off with someone who goes, well, the kids are doing all this stuff and I'm not able to do anything about that. You want to be doing the finger on the pulse to say, okay, what are you doing? Because they will have been doing it for a while, which is why they're in your office, because that hasn't netted the result that they're after. So the key to this is that it's not just a way to try to get kids to do what they're told. It's actually becoming more loving more often, which means having effective limits that are clear, set, enforced, and consistent. And remembering the developmental stage of the child, which means things are likely to be different for a 4-year-old as they are for a 14-year-old. And your role as a neutral big letters for the word neutral referee, enforcing third-party consequences. Third-party consequences means not you, and don't make me angry, which of course kids love to do. If they can have control over your feelings, they're going, where do I start? And of course, lovingly, to the degree that you're able. So let's start with the clarity. The clarity begins with what the behavior is. Now, in any family situation, for the child, you want to have two of these. One is for just a day-to-day routine. In other words, from waking up to getting to school, and from coming home from school to bed. Because what happens is so many parents just literally reinvent the wheel every day with these things. And there isn't just clarity about what needs to happen by what time, so that the kid knows and the parent is setting that and enforcing that consistently. Now, very important right from the start to similarly situate the very reasons that the parents are having difficulty enforcing consistently with the children in a context whereby the chances are their parents did not do anything resembling consistency and did not do anything resembling clarity. Most parenting of the day was very ad hoc, in the moment. The parent goes, sweetie darling, please don't do that, and then eventually it's just bang, okay, that's it. And then they're in an adolescent mechanism, they're acting out, it's intimidating, the kid's frightened into compliance, and so that's what ends up happening when that kid becomes the parent, because that's what's in their toolbox that they didn't choose. So to put all of this, not in terms of good parent, bad parent, but just what was your normal? What's going to be there in your back room when you go to do it later on, remembering that everything is not press the button, ring the bell, because you've got a shop front and a back room. So often you'll have parents who they don't want to do what was done to them, to their kids, so they're very, oh, well, we won't enforce anything. And until they're sleep deprived and they just lose the plot and then go, oh, I swore I'd never do that, which is what you're going to help them with the triggered moment. So similarly, this is going to be a diagnostic tool. This is not, oh, you should read this and become a perfect parent because you logically agree with it. No, it's just going to show you what you can't do. And that's then going to be the engagement for what inner work they're going to need to do in order to be able to enforce this neutrally, in a neutral tone, in a civil tone, in a friendly tone. And the way to do that is to have the third party consequence that is not, don't make me come down there. That's, well, either you're going to do this or this is what's going to happen. You know, well, you won't get to have Wi-Fi tonight, or you won't get to watch your program, or and we'll talk about all the various things, because what parents have a lot of difficulty with is coming up with consequences that are clear and consistent, and that are third-party consequences that's not, well, I'll shout at you louder, or eventually I'll pick you up and take you somewhere. So we'll kind of go through this in quite a lot of detail, because the parents are going to be the ones that are going to have the greatest level of difficulty being consistent. The kids, because they're more flexible, they tend to become pretty consistent pretty quickly. It's the parents that have difficulty with the consistency, and you want to let them know ahead of time that that's what's going to be difficult for them, so that they're not thinking there's something wrong with them. So that this is very much a diagnostic tool, that you're just going to see what they're able to do and not able to do, and then you're going to help them with the bits they're not able to do. Can you see that that's what I mean by holistic? There isn't anything that's not part of the process. You also want to take into consideration, but by the time someone's coming into your office, usually the wheels are either nearly off or completely off, or were completely off years ago. in which case the state that the person's in is not believing in anything. That nothing works. And you want to just feel that and go, well, it's possible that this won't work either, but let's wait and see. So that you're not saying, oh, well, just because I've had a lot of good experience with this, that it'll work for you. You're just saying, try it and see. So let's start with, and I might use the board for this, how to fill this in. Because in doing it in actual time will help clarify what clarity is, what setting is, what enforcing is, and what consistency is. Okay. So we're going to start to fill in the setting and enforcing clearly and consistently blank. Just before we do that, I just want to see if there's any questions in a general way about, before we go into the specifics.
So are we looking at the child's behaviour or the parent's behaviour?
We're looking at both. So in terms of, are we looking at the child's behaviour or the parent's behaviour, it's mainly to do with the child's behaviour. However, there is also one whole form, which is just for each of the parents, which is if they don't set and enforce the limits neutrally. So the child then has a right to go to give them a reminder. This is all organised ahead of time, which would be, Mummy, you're not enforcing this limit in a neutral way, you know, can you say that in a friendly tone or in a civil tone? Or you'll have to go to your room. Now for most parents, it's like, oh yes. But it's that sense of that it's a flat hierarchy, that yes, the parent has a guidance role with the child, but that doesn't give them the right to use insensitive methods or intimidation as a means of doing that, which is why the third-party consequences are so important. However, the children don't have a guidance role on the parents when it comes to all sorts of other things. So this is just to do with A, daily routine, and B, specific behaviours that the parents want to work on, which I would suggest initially would be 1, maybe 2, 3 as a maximum, because you want to kind of chase after one rabbit and get one rabbit. And if you're changing the dynamics of the household and the way that things are being dealt with, you want to start with small and then refine later on once you've got some runs on the board, particularly A, from the parent's point of view, and also for what the child can deal with or children can deal with. But what I can say is, from having used this in some of the Harlems of Sydney, Claymore, Shelby, this can turn a family around in a matter of 2 weeks. Doesn't always happen in 2 weeks, but the difference is chalk and cheese when the parent knows what to do, how to do it, has agreed with themselves or their partner to do that for 8 weeks, no matter what, and that the children see that and notice that. And the difference between the first week and the second week, where they start to see, oh, this is different and this is able to be possible, because from the parents' point of view, they've got no model of it. So it's like foreign territory. So, obviously, yes, this is, the first 2 is for the child, and this one is for the parent. And all you're doing is making a distinction between literally, and we'll do it on this form, which is from waking to getting to school. Obviously weekend's going to be different. And then from school, coming home from school, to bed. So, having clarity about what time each thing. What time, what thing. And, you know, some parents already have that stuff clear on the fridge and stuff to do with, well, you need to be dressed by 7:30, finished breakfast by 8 a.m. in the car or bus or at the bus stop by 8:30. Can you see what I mean about reinventing the wheel? You're just clarifying stuff so that it's clear both to the child and to the adult, because for a lot of adults, they never had that. So everything was just when I get prompted, when I get prompted. And so their parenting is when I prompt them, and they're knackered. They're just exhausted by the time they get to here. And that's when they've been very nice of it, and then it's like they just go nuts because they didn't start here. And they're not using third-party consequences. And obviously after school, it's, you know, play lunch or whatever you call it over here, out of bag by 4:30, and homework by whatever time. And then, you know, there's usually dinner, which could be at table by. And then the whole bedtime routine, teeth, toilet, and then story and lights out by whatever that might be, 8 p.m. or whatever. And can you see, this is clarity. Now, many people are going to go, well, I don't want to have my health like a military, whatever it is. And no one's talking about taking away democratic rights to change or do or be flexible with stuff. But you have to have a starting point, which is why I say to people, don't even start doing this unless you're committed to this for 8 weeks. Because, of course, there can be loads of exceptions to this, but if you don't have this structure in place, there's nothing to be flexible from. You're just reinventing the wheel every day, and you're literally building a chair to sit in today that tomorrow is in pieces on the floor that you then build again, as opposed to actually building a chair that's there every day, and that's the chair, and you're not building it each day. So is all that clear enough?
So just going back to what you said before about just do 1, 2 or 3.
Yeah, but that's the second one.
Oh, that's the second one.
That's the second one. This is just the routine.
Oh, okay. Okay, sorry. Mm-hmm.
Then on top of this, the second one's going to be the behaviours, because often the people who are going to come in are not going to be coming in because of the daily routine. It's because the kid's screaming all the time, or the kid's kicking their brother all the time, or the kid's not able to stop what they're doing in class, or whatever it is. So there'll be a behaviour that's, but you want to start with this, because, apart from anything else, because this is actually simpler. This is stuff that there's no question about, whereas often when the kid's doing a behaviour, it's triggering whatever's in the back room of the parent.
How old, what age would you do this up to?
Depends on the family, but I have in-laws who are still living with their mother in their late 50s. So obviously there's a transition, and so the question, which is at up to what age would you use this? It depends on the situation. However, I'm often working with what I would call our version of failure to launch, where in Australia adolescence can last a really long time, and so you've got parents who have a 25-year-old still living at home, but they haven't made the transition from child to housemate who happens to be living in my house, who happens to be my child, who's no longer a child. And the child hasn't made the transition and the parent hasn't made the transition. And so this stuff is just helping you make clear what that is. Now, obviously with an older, the parent on a certain level doesn't have a guidance role anymore. Like I'm going to suggest after 18, they don't have a guidance role anymore. In which case you'd be doing a different limit setting that's to do with what I can live with in my household and what needs to be clear and what the consequences are. Because most of them, and some of them at 30 and 35, are just going, well, he does all this stuff and he brings all of this drugs and stuff into my house and it's terrible, but I don't know what to do. Mainly because there isn't any sense of being able to set and enforce limits around their own personal space. And so they end up living in an existential hell because no one ever taught them that they can say, no, if you do this, this is what will happen. And eventually you won't get to be here. But for some parents, that's like it's not negotiable. In which case you have to work incrementally backwards. But we'll work more with that in the second one.
A daily routine for older.
No, of course not. And that's what I meant at the bottom of the page here. You know, remember the developmental stage of the child, and this is stuff you can look up on Google. It's very known about now, but when most of us were growing up, no one even knew what the developmental stage was. This is what we're kind of catching up on, because we were all a generation before that. Children were just perceived as little adults who you had to break their will in order to, get some level of compliance, which is all the backroom stuff that we're dealing with today. Okay, so this is just the clarity side of things. Then you're starting to do the setting, which is the reminder. Now, obviously, with younger kids, as many as you like, but I suggest to start off with maybe 3, maybe 2, depending on the parent. Some parents will go, no, I'm not giving them 3, I'm only giving them 1. And it's like, all right, but you might find that they don't do it so well initially, because of course later on you can always make it less. You can go from 3 to 2, but initially you want them to win. And what those 3 would be is, if it's 7:30, that you're reminding them at 7, 7:15 and 7:29. So that they get the opportunity, because what you're doing is you're not disciplining them. You're teaching them self-discipline. Big difference. They're having to think, which way do I want to go here, as opposed to, well, just when I'm terrified, that's what I do. Because then what happens is, as soon as the parent isn't there and they're an adult, they don't know what to do, which is why things go very weird in adolescence, because there isn't any sense of self-discipline. It's just, oh, well, they're not here, we can do whatever we like. Yes? So the 3 reminders is to get them to go, oh yeah, which way do I want to go? And that's going to happen because there's a consequence, and this is the stuff that people find difficult. Sometimes they'll already have consequences that work, and you'll just be adding to them, and you want as many increments as possible, so that, let's start off with, okay, so it's nearly 7:30. If you're not dressed by 7:30, then maybe you don't get your favorite breakfast. You know, instead of getting eggs on toast, you get Wheat Bix, or what the parent knows the kid's not so fussed on, or you just get fruit. So that you're starting off with something that's not such a big deal, but that the kid has to go, yeah, which one do I want? But then it's, well, I don't care if I don't get my favorite brekkie. This usually happens as the child gets older. So you need backup consequences. Well, you see, if you don't do that and you don't get your favorite brekkie, it also means that when you get home, you don't get Wi-Fi, or you don't get to watch the program that you usually like to watch when you come home. Or so there's no Wi-Fi. And this is a list that just goes on, that just gets worse for the kid. So that at the end of this is, and eventually you don't get to be in the house. Now that's going to be very challenging and triggering for a lot of people. But just remember that can be just, well, you're on the veranda. In other words, where the kid realizes that if they're not willing to cooperate in this way, then the parent isn't willing to cooperate with all of the stuff that they take for granted. And of course you have many, many increments before that, which might go from, well, you don't get access to your room, which of course kids tend to take for granted. So just put a little lock at the top thing that says, well, you don't get your room. Or, later in adolescence where it's like, yeah, I'm not doing this. And it's like, well, okay. Increments before that can be, well, you don't get to use your bed. You get a yoga mat and a sleeping bag. Or it can be that you don't get a cooked dinner. You get a sandwich. There was one family where it was like, the mother says to me, yeah, well, I'm not a very good cook. My kids would actually opt for the sandwich. But what you're doing is basically saying, look, it's up to you how far you want to go, but it's not going to get any better. It's only going to get worse, and that's up to you. This is the one you'll have to work with the most. Yes?
Oh, sorry.
No, it's all right.
So just having flashbacks now and
Yes.
traumatised parenting things.
Yes.
Because I'm thinking about your front door, back door stuff.
Yes.
And as a kid, having your safety removed is traumatic.
What are you calling your safety?
Well, if you're put on the veranda or told,
Well, I'm thinking of an internal veranda.
yeah. No, I'm kidding. My father did that to one of my kids.
Yeah, look, this is...
He got outside. It was literally
Yes.
safe veranda and it was all fine. But I'm like, I don't feel good about that.
Yes, obviously, this is not something that I'm putting here. I'm just using examples from previous clients, okay? This is for the parent in exactly the same way as we did with the conflict navigation guide of labeling, where it has to be what each of those individuals label and know and understand. This is what the parent goes, yeah, I can live with that. So this is not something you're enforcing on them. You're saying to them, well, what do you want to use?
Yeah, so I understand that, but if they chose to do that, so let's say we go, okay, we were good about the veranda.
Yeah.
From the child's world, could that be?
Well, of course it could be,
they're on the
but
psych's couch.
well, it could be,
Go,
yeah.
Let's put me on the veranda.
But how many kids are on the psych couch because of all of the horrendous ways that parents have done? So our job is not to second guess the parent. I mean, there is horrendous parenting going on the planet as we speak. And it's not our job to go, this is the right way or the wrong way. They're coming in and saying, can you help me do this? Given that you're saying, well, we want to do this effectively and sensitively, obviously that's within the bounds of whatever the parents call sensitive. So we kind of have to get off our own pot in order to go, well, this is where these people are, not be the local docs going, well, we don't think this is so fabulous. You actually have to go into that. You can have it on your shelf as, where did you get that from? Because, I mean, you're going to have parents who are going to come in and go, well, why can't I hit them? You're going to have to work with that. And you'll do it from the point of view of effectiveness and sensitivity, and you'll work with that framework of, well, where did you get that from? When did that become your normal? And literally helping them work with, okay, so if I became 3 times my size and I decided to get a strap or a judge cord and do this to you in my counselling office here, how might that be for you? And that often has people going, oh, I see, but that they don't see initially, like the resistance. Do you find? Does that answer the question? And then there's what the incentive is. In other words, if they go, depending on what their usual is, let's say this never happens, then you'd go, if you go 1 day getting this stuff done, what do you get? And it's something that's repetitive that the parent can actually do on an ongoing basis. So you don't want it to be, well, I'll give them $10 and the parent can't afford $10 every day. So usually it's, well, they get a favorite dessert, or they get extra story time, or it might be money. There you want to just go, what is the usual amount paid, and it doesn't matter whether it's a regular thing or not a regular thing. It's simply if, let's say, they get about $10 a week or $5 a week, make it $7 and make it $1 a day, and then chop these down into just percentages of that day, of that dollar. So that at the end of the day, they get, or even during, you know, here's your 20 cents for that, here's your, so that you're always catching them out doing something right. So they actually get it because they're not abstract thinkers as children. So is that part clear? Yeah?
I'll just share that when, so my daughter was 17, went through a lot of mental health issues, was having quite violent outbursts. And just seeing that like that, I'm like, I started a star chart with her, which
Yes.
we did when they were little.
Yes.
And it totally worked.
Yes.
Like she was like, and you would think,
Yes.
how can it, she's 17, but she was like, Mum, I did a whole month.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
And-
you know, to be able to go, and each week to be able to
Yep.
see it. And
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
it's that.
and the star charts is about clarity
Yeah.
and consistency.
Yeah.
You know, it's not so much to do with the setting and the enforcing.
Yeah.
But by the time they're getting the star, it's because the setting and enforcing is getting stars for. Do you follow?
Yeah.
So it's just to say, yes, this stuff works. All this does is add to it from the point of view of when they're not getting the stars, because you have to have both. You have to have the incentive and you have to have consequences that actually work. And this is the key one, which it might not be not being able to be in the house, but whatever it is, that's the bottom line for the parent. Do you follow? And you have to work out what that is, you know. And for some people, it's, well, you have to stay with grandma. And it's not a holiday. You just get a room and you get your food and that's it. Or a friend or whoever it is, so that they realize, no, this is not just taken for granted. You earn it by doing this stuff. Okay? So now let's go to behavior. And obviously you're going to do one of those each for each of the kids, and eventually one each for whoever's caring for them for the neutral enforcement. So similarly, let's say the behavior is shouting, and it could be either at parent or at sibling. Now, there you want to minimize the reminders. It's once and you're out. So you get a reminder so that they get the opportunity to notice, what am I doing? Because it's their normal. And it's literally the stop or I'm leaving. That's shouting, you're either going to stop or this is the consequence. Do you follow?
So do we write?
Well, it's whatever
the
their
behaviour-
consequence is
the
going to be.
behaviour, sorry, do you want the behaviour to be the positive one that we want to
No,
do,
you're
or-
putting the one that they're doing, that you can label: shouting, voice raising, name calling, put down, kicking brother.
Yeah.
Like only what a video camera would see.
Yeah.
Now, because we talked about kicking brother, I kind of make a distinction to do with physical violence, even though there's all questions about that says no reminders. Because otherwise, if you have one reminder, then they always get one in. Whereas, if it happens, there's zero reminder, you're already into the consequence. Because this is something that you will have sat down, the parents will have sat down with the kids and go, look, I know this is how we've done things before, but this is what we're going to be doing from now, and it's going to be very hard for us to be consistent with it, very hard for you to do as well. But we want to do this because we don't want to be shouting at you. We don't want to be having these escalations. We want to be more loving, more often. That's the whole point. And then you're going to do the same sort of stuff in terms of consequences. And obviously, yes, there's going to be a huge difference between how you do this with a 3-year-old and how you do this with a 13-year-old and how you do this with a 23-year-old. Really, really different to do with the developmental stage. And often, here towards, middle to late adolescence and beyond, it's, well, you don't get to be here. But you have lots of increments. So they have to really go, I want to use you as a doormat or else. And you have to be able to go, well, go find another doormat. And that stuff you probably have to help them with because they often don't have that ability to do it themselves, which is their inner work. Clear enough? Just the difference between one or more reminders and 0 reminders. Yes? Okay. So now we're going to go to the parents one. So this is their own form with the singular behavior, which is non-neutral setting or enforcing of this. In other words, where it's not, well, you've just shouted, so you'll have to go to your room if you don't stop. It's, you're shouting and I don't want you to shout. And where the kid needs the ability to go, well, you need to tell me that without shouting at me. Even though the kid's just shouted, can you hear? Because what you're setting up is, no one's doing shouting here. Doesn't matter whether you're older or younger, whether you've got a guidance role or not. Everybody deserves to be talked in a neutral tone, in a civil tone, and a friendly tone. So the singular one for the parent is let's make sure Alice can see. Is not setting and or enforcing limits neutrally. And you want to help the kids to label the behavior, whether it's voice raising. And the reason I use voice raising is because it doesn't have all of the criticism that's tied up with shouting, yelling, screaming, because someone might go, well, I'm not screaming, but to someone it feels like screaming. Whereas if you say voice raising, everybody knows if it's not just talking normally. And you want to wear it on the chin that says, well, okay, and you want to come with your own that says, yes, if I do that, I'm willing to be sent to my room. No, you just have the wine in the little cabinet that no one sees. So it's just something that says we're all willing to take something on the chin that says, if I'm not doing neutral, you have the right, because it's what you want for later on, so that other people, adults, can't just do that to them and they go, oh, well, I guess that's how it is, which of course leads to so much relational abuse, sexual abuse, psychological abuse, because no one's told them no. It doesn't matter if someone's an adult or has a guidance role, that doesn't give them the right to treat you insensitively. Is this clear? So, any questions on that? Because that pretty much covers setting and enforcing clearly and consistently. And people, when you show them this, kind of go, oh, there'll be a list a mile long of why they think this won't work. Because that's been their experience. So you don't want to kind of take that as resistance. That's them saying, I've never seen it, that's not a planet I've ever lived on. And you want to go, yeah, I understand that. But I don't need to understand electricity to go over to a button on the wall and turn it on and go, oh, that's good. And you want to literally bring it like that. That says, just go over to the wall, press the button, see if it goes on. Get them to do it. See what happens. Yes? Question?
So, you're raising your voice at me, Mum, when they're like 3.
Yeah, look, this is what I mean about developmental stages. The parent's going to do this to the level that they've got the awareness of it. And often parents are coming with like a 3, a 5 and a 7-year-old. and they're having to kind of work that in terms of their sense of where the kid's at, because it's not necessarily what Google says in terms of developmental stages. So it's just relative to the parent and the child. And then taking into consideration that often there's two parents, whether they're same-sex or otherwise, and that's where you need the conflict navigation guide for them to actually navigate what one would do as opposed to what the other would do, and coming to a point of which is probably not what either of them like, but what they can agree on in order for it to be the same for the kid. Now that's ideal, but there's plenty of situations where I'm only seeing the wife and the father's not interested in this stuff at all, and you can still do it. Because children go from home, one set of rules, and go to a school, completely different set of rules, and they're fine. So all that happens is, this is mum's set of rules and dad's not involved with that, so you're on your own with that. Doesn't mean you can't have the consistency from the parent who's wanting to give it. And this is often the case when you've got separated relationships, where you might want consistency, and in a lot of modern separated couples, they'll both be willing to do the same thing at their house, and there'll be plenty where one's saying, nah, I wouldn't, not even going to talk to you. And you can still do it, and the kid knows the difference between the households. And this is usually the calmer household. Does that answer that question? Cool. So, just to finish off, this is a tool, this is a template. You're going to have to work with who's in your room and their ability to engage with this in their way. So the last thing you want to be doing is imposing it on them in some way, shape or form. You want to be getting, what is it that they can do? And in some situations, it's going to be one thing. They're going to be able to do one thing, and that'll be the thing that you help them with. And don't worry about the fact that it seems small to you, because for some people, it's going to be huge. Okay?